Good evening. First and foremost, let me again say congratulations to Jim and Harvey. They're both people I've known for a long time and have immense respect for. And Jim has trained countless GE executives over time, done it for free. So, on my behalf, I'd like to say thanks. I really applaud the efforts that you're doing here in leadership education and trying to get away to think about things. About every 18 months, we have our business teams kind of go away to our Leadership Institute and just as an intact team sit around and just think about their strategies in the business. And it's good to get out of the day-to-day grind and get a chance to think about things. And I think the notion of taking radiology up to the next level and studying leadership is terrific. So congratulations on such a great effort. And to the ACR, I think it's great that you guys are doing this. So what I thought I'd do tonight is just really 2 or 3 things. And then I'm happy to take questions. I thought I'd talk a little bit about healthcare and a little bit about leadership, and then give some thoughts about where kind of I see radiology going. And I'm at the point in my life where I don't really prepare speeches anymore, so I just kind of talk about the stuff I know about. So this is not going to be fancy, and I hope there's nobody from the media here, so I'll be as honest as I possibly can, and try not to get myself in trouble or get you in trouble at the same time. Healthcare. I'd start with healthcare. GE sees healthcare in a number of different ways. We have a big business that we interface with everybody in this room that's about $18 billion in revenue, and it's kind of a legacy GE business, started in 1915, and big, successful. It's one of the big public faces of the company. So we're a big technology leader in the industry. And we also are a legacy company that's been offering employee benefits since the 1940s. So we spend $3 billion a year on employee health care. So we see the industry as both a payer, and we see the industry as a big technology provider in the industry. And I always tell our investors, if we can earn more in our healthcare business than we spend on our healthcare on our employees, that's a good year. And sometimes it's easier than others, but we kind of have the natural healthcare hedge. So the U.S. has $2.5 trillion of healthcare spending. This year, it's going to grow about 9.5%. It's just unsustainable. We're heading towards 20% plus healthcare spending. There's been a big debate about healthcare reform. I don't really agree with many of the things around healthcare reform, but I applaud the president for taking on healthcare, because we're going to be working on healthcare for the rest of our life. We're going to be, as a society, working on it for the rest of our life. It's about 15 or 16% of the GDP today, growing to 20%. We just moved 1,000 jobs back from Mexico and China back to Louisville, Kentucky to make appliances, and healthcare is roughly 40% of the compensation, which is just unsustainable. So that's kind of the lay of the land in terms of where healthcare is. Now, I kind of sit back and say, if you were going to redesign healthcare, how would you think about it? And I think about healthcare in the terms of, can you make it a great patient experience? In other words, can you make more people well and create a different healthcare dynamic for the long term? That should be one goal. We should have a good healthcare industry because there's lots of jobs in the healthcare industry. That should be a goal. And we should try to keep inflation to more or less CPI. Or maybe if you could keep inflation in healthcare maybe even at 4 or 5% instead of 9%, we could probably still be a competitive society if you could do those 3 things. So I first say it would be nice if somebody in Washington actually had a set of healthcare goals. They would say, here's kind of what we're trying to do. And then what I often in my career have said, when problems are so big and broad that you can't solve them in their entirety, and that's really healthcare. Healthcare is the world's most intricate, difficult systems problem. You need to break it into pieces. And when I think about healthcare, I think there's really 4 pieces or 4 work streams that in some way, shape, or form we need to be working on. I'm going to give you some views tonight. You may not agree with, and they all intersect with radiology in some way. So I'll give you kind of in some ways the way we kind of dissect healthcare and how we think about it for the future. The first one is consumerism. We're just never going to be successful without driving more consumerism. In 2009, we took our employees from, kind of a co-pay plan to a high deductible plan. And basically we pay for 100% of prevention. Depending on how much money you make, we cap, how much you pay every year. And if you really get sick, we take care of you for the long term. And so, we basically are trying to promote wellness. We have 623 sites in the United States, and we grade each one on healthcare. We have fitness centers. We have good diets. We have no smoking sites, and all of our. And we control how much we invest based on healthcare. We actually treat it like safety. And we saw a one-time decline of about 15% when you drive more consumerism. We've got a website that our employees can go to, and basically we just make all of our employees be better consumers of healthcare. And I've seen enough of it to really think that this is going to be the way that other businesses are going. In fact, we see a lot of businesses going there right now. I think inevitably if the government would want to do drive better efficacy in healthcare, they would actually make government employees go to more of a high deductible plan. But in some way, shape, or form, we're going to see more consumerism in U.S. healthcare plans as time goes on. So one big pillar of the future in healthcare is consumerism. The second one is, how do you change the curve of chronic disease? And 75 or 80% of U.S. healthcare dollars are in chronic disease. And that's a place where the technology is quite rich. And when I talk about consumerism, I talk about GE more as an employer. When I talk about chronic disease, I think about us more as what do we do with radiology and how do we treat the future. And actually, I see kind of the richness of how diagnostic imaging is joining with therapy. And I look at some of the aspects of having high-value diagnostics in Alzheimer's disease and cancer, more consumer, more home health in the future. And I see an incredible richness of technology in the treatment of chronic disease, both in neurology and oncology, than I've seen at any time in the history of the industry. And so we keep investing. We invest about $1.5 billion a year in R&D in our healthcare business, and we are basically chasing kind of a broad-based diagnostics platform and a notion that high-value diagnostics matched with radiology is really a way that you can lower healthcare costs and improve outcomes over the long term. And in that regard, we really are placing bets that radiology intersects with pathology, and that over time those two departments are going to merge in an important way. And we think that's the next leg of growth for some of you and for us as we look forward. And I think that's very exciting. So we see incredible high-end new science and new technology that we think is going to be important for radiology going forward. So that's the second thing we pursue in terms of how do you drive better competitiveness for the U.S. over the long term in healthcare. The third thing is low-cost systems, and how do we translate and how do we drive low-cost systems into healthcare around the world. We have a great woman who a lot of you know who has run many of the modalities in our business named Terry Bresenham, and Terry, for some strange reason, wanted to move to India, and so she now runs our healthcare business in India. And she used to run our CT business and our nuclear medicine business. A lot of you guys know Terry Bresenham. She's a terrific executive. She sent me an email today. So Terry just got her physical, and she went to Manipal Hospital in Bangalore. And last year she went, no offense to anybody in the room, I swear, she got an executive physical at Northwestern. So please forgive me. I know there's some of you in the room here today. So last year she got an executive physical at Northwestern for $2,200. Yesterday she got an executive physical, exactly the same routines, at Manipal Hospital in Bangalore, 5,600 rupees, $100. So, the point I make, I think for the people in this room, you're going to get more volume as healthcare reform takes place. I mean, I actually Nothing stops, not even the CMS can stop demographics. That is something that's going to occur with radiology as time goes on in an important way. But we have to find a way to bring low-cost systems into radiology and into the healthcare system. And there are procedures that I see take place every day around the world on some of the same equipment that we sell here that are orders of magnitude lower cost than what we see here. We have to find better ways to implement information technology. I'd say most of the information technology that's taken place in healthcare has been wasted so far because we've used it exclusively for connectivity and not enough for decision support. So I think low-cost systems are going to be a big wave of the future, and the people in this room that kind of can achieve scale and drive low-cost systems are the ones that are going to do better. And then the fourth thing I think about in terms of healthcare is just payment reform. And again, I put my employer hat back on payment reform. There's 15 cities in the U.S. that make a difference for GE that represent about 80% of our employee base. The difference in cost per employee, once we factor out age and things like that, the difference between cost per employee in those 15 cities is 80% between the low and the high. It's just ridiculous as time goes on. So I think what you're going to see is more activity by employers on a city-by-city basis. We are self-insured because we're a big company. I say 10 years from now, we blow straight through insurance companies. We don't use insurance companies for anything at all. We'll be in the direct bill business. We'll be working with other big employers. So I would say the next decade, you're going to see, we're going to take control completely of our own healthcare costs. We're going to have clinics on site. We're going to work with other big employers. I was telling Jim on the table here, I still do a lot of customer visits and customer calls. And I always go to the CEO of the hospital and say, hey, how you doing? How's business? I always start off with a really creative, probing question. How's business? And he or she says, business is great. We're earning 5% on revenue this year. And I say, well, why? And they say with a big smile on their face, well, we've got a better payer mix. Now, personally, I always like our customers to do well. But when I hear it's payer mix, it hurts my feelings a little bit. It basically says that we're not, that basically they've got more private insurance guys and they're charging us more, and it's a big cost shifting game. And so those things have to end. Those things have to end. So I think the one thing to blame businesses for is we've been lousy consumers of healthcare. And businesses are going to get more engaged, more involved, because we have to. Fundamentally, the value added of insurance companies to a company like GE are non-existent. And I think we could tolerate that to a certain point. But when $3 billion is real money even to us, and so you're going to see changes like that. So if I put all those things together and said, what would I be thinking about if I was in radiology, and what would I be thinking about if I were people in this room, it would be more volume. You're going to get more volume. The cost pressures are unending and not going to go away. There's still going to be a substantial high-end mix. So I actually look at technology as being a barbell. There's going to be lots of high-end spending, and there's going to be a lot of mid-tier or low-value products, and there's not going to be much in between. So don't give up on innovation. And I would say that if you work in a big hospital setting, pathology and radiology are going to merge and find ways to get some of that turf and find ways to figure out how to do that. And the last thing I'd say is that information technology has to go from connectivity to decision support. And those are the bets that we're making in our healthcare business. And we run a pretty good healthcare business. It's, for the first time in our history, in the first quarter of 2012, we sold more CTs in China than we did in the United States. So, we see very much global demand, but the technology leadership is still in this country. So that is everything I know about healthcare. Okay, so so let me shift gears now and talk about leadership and talk about, I know you had a nice day today at Northwestern, and I think leadership is a continuous journey. I think good leaders are students of leadership. I learn a lot every day. I'm constantly reading books and meeting people. And the one good thing about running GE is everybody will have lunch with you once. You can have lunch with the President of the United States or Chancellor Merkel or Warren Buffett. You got to earn the second time, but you can probably get in the door the first time. And so you get an infinite capacity to lead. So I'll give you a kind of, try to make it as homogenous as I can. What are things that good leaders do, and particularly today. And I would start with one of the things that every good leader has to do today is have a point of view. We live in a time period of unprecedented uncertainty. Unprecedented uncertainty. I've worked for GE for 30 years. I've never seen a time when so few things are known. Anybody in this room that thinks something's going to be decided in the November elections in the U.S. is crazy, right? There's nothing that's going to be decided in the elections in the U.S. this year. Anybody in this room that thinks we're not going to be talking about Italy, Spain, and Greece a year from now, or 2 years from now, 3 years from now, is crazy. We're going to be talking about Europe for 5 years, 10 years. I mean, we are in a reset that is as profound as almost any 5 or 10 year period in the economic history of the country. So deal with it. If you go to bed tonight expecting to wake up and be in 1997, you're going to be unhappy. But if you can deal with ambiguity and volatility and things like that, you're going to be happy. And I always vote for happiness. Really, I always vote. And what your people want from you is they want you to have a point of view. They want you to walk, you are the only sane person they're going to see today. They're not going to see it in Washington. They're not going to see it on MSNBC or Fox News. You're not going to see it anyplace else. If I work for you, if you're a chair of radiology or run a big group, you are the only sane person anybody's going to see today. So your employees, now, look, I'm in many ways, I'm just like you, only have a lot more of everything. I've got 300,000 people leading around the world. And if I walked in tomorrow to GE and said, you know what, guys, we're screwed. I don't know what to do. The pressure's too much. It is, people are going to say, whoa, what do we, I walk in and say, hey, it's all fallen into place. It's multi-speed world. Governments are going to, cut back on fiscal spending. We're going to invest in growth. Here's our emerging market play. We're going to own our own supply chain. Here's our plan. Now you can change your plan every now and then, but people want to see a point of view, and that is really important. The second thing I talk about in terms of leadership is how important it is to have metrics. How important it is to pick what success feels like, what you think people are going to be all about. And it's one of the things that I do, again, when I go see customers or any place I go, I'll ask another CEO, what are you measuring? What's important to you? How do you measure success? What is it all about? And when I have to in GE, every now and then, I have to go in and replace a leader who's failing. I always see, and I'm having a round table with the team, and you're just taking the leader out, you're introducing a new leader, and I always find two things have happened. One is nobody knows what their measurements are, and the other one is nobody knows who they work for. You have these very complicated matrix organizations and things like that. So one of the things I think leaders really have to do is define success, even in a small business, define measurements, and even doctors can be measured. Even healthcare can be measured. I'm not even telling you what it should be. It doesn't have to be financial. It could be quality. It can be anything else. But define. The leader has to define what performance is. The third thing I'd say good leaders do is they know how work gets done. I run a company with 300,000 people. I've got great leaders. I can't possibly do it all myself and don't want to. But I basically have an idea how every job in GE gets done. I always pick 2 or 3 things every year where I can go deep into organizations in one specific area: customer service, working capital terms, where we're investing. And I tend to be very hands-on in terms of understanding how our people in our company do their work. how does a frontline person do their work? If you came into my office, what you would see on the walls of my office aren't like Norman Rockwell prints or expressions or stuff like that. You see jet engines, MR scanners, pictures of factories, and I show people doing work. And I think leaders fail when they don't have an in-depth understanding, a hands-on understanding of how people, you can still empower, you can still do all those things, and you want to make sure that everybody in your organization feels like you can intersect with their life at any moment of any day. I read 40 or 50 journals every week. I say this again with all great affection is, you don't need to read the newspaper every day. I guarantee you the Wall Street Journal tomorrow is going to have the same articles it had today. And since we're selling NBC, you don't have to watch TV anymore either. So I don't have the great affinity. But I read Modern Healthcare every week. I read Aviation Week every week. I read Oil and Gas every week. I read all the vertical trade journals I read every week. And I'll pull a page out of Modern Healthcare on reimbursement or something like that. I'll write a note to John Deneen, who runs our healthcare business, and I said, hey, John, looks like this is going to happen. Most times I wouldn't even have read the article completely, but he doesn't know that, right? So you intersect with their life in a detailed way all the time. And so I'd say good leaders know how work gets done. Fourth is you've got to be the leader is the only person that can really think of and drive change, meaningful change. So, I think your organizations, again, whether you run a big radiology group or a partnership, probably inertia can keep it going forward. But, you have to be the one that kind of knows how to listen, knows how to learn, and ultimately knows how to drive big change inside your organization. And so constantly at GE, we're trying to pick 2 or 3 or 4 things we're always trying to get better at. And if you pick too many, it drives people crazy and you get defocused. But I would suggest to you, if you're not picking anything right now, you're going to get hammered in healthcare. And so I look at you guys and say, all of you ought to be working on some kind of cycle time reduction program. I mean, probably most of you are. But if I were in radiology today, I'd be working on some kind of quality or cycle time reduction program that you can embrace and you can drive, and you can be the one that is driving change. So leaders drive change, and that's incredibly important that you are comfortable with that. And even though I think you're in a group of equals, so it's hard to tell another physician what to do. I mean, I have an appreciation for that. But I would say in many ways, even if you're running a big company, there's probably only 3 or 4 times a year where I kind of look around my leadership team and say, hey, look, shut up, here's what we're doing. If you never do that, you get anarchy. If you do it too many times, good people leave. But I think people want to be led, they want to change, they want to get better. It's something everybody has in common. So again, I urge you to learn how to drive change. The 5th thing is, I know something you talked about today, is you got to be a good investor. And you got to be willing to take risks, and you got to be willing to stand up and have a long-term focus and be willing to take those kind of situations on. And we take a lot of risk in GE. And I think good leaders are good risk managers. I know you had a session today, and I always think risk is about risk reward. It's about understanding what you're getting into and kind of being able to balance between how much risk you're willing to take and what the upside is. We recently made a decision to, we're a global company and we're big in power generation and big on a global basis. And we want to do a lot of business in Nigeria. Nigeria happens to be an interesting company now. Nigeria's got 180 million people. They're one of the biggest oil and gas producers in the world, and they have no electricity. They're lacking 40 gigawatts of electricity. So I go and say, let's invest $200 million in Nigeria And if we're wrong, and Nigeria's as hard as it gets. I mean, there's no governance, or there's all kinds of terrible things about Nigeria. It's not like doing business in Illinois or something. Well, maybe it is like Illinois, but not like most other places, right? So I go to my board and say, look, we're going to invest $200 million in Nigeria, and if we are right, we're going to make like $10 billion, and if we're wrong, we're going to lose $200 million. But we could be wrong. We could easily lose $200 million. But we could be right. But I think $200 million for $10 billion is the right, and I bring my risk team in, and I let the board listen to all the people that disagreed. I say, here are all the people that disagreed. Here are all the people that believe, and we're always doing like red team, blue team, and things like that. But here it is in balance, right? And then I contrast that, in terms of, let's say even the U.S. Like if you wanted to build a nuclear power plant in the U.S. without any kind of liability regime. So if you did that in the U.S., if you did everything right, you'd make $100 million. And if you did one thing wrong, you'd lose $20 billion. So my answer is, even though that's the U.S., my answer to that is no. That risk reward is out of balance. So you've got to have a good nose for what is the right balance. People that don't take any risk today are going to get hammered because there is no tailwind. You're really in a world where, Jim and I were talking about it earlier. Really, if you were in this industry from like mid-80s till 2000 plus, other than a couple Hillary Clinton years, you couldn't miss doing okay. That's not the world we live in today. So the world we live in today is all about managing risk reward, and you got to take risk. So, point of view, know how to set metrics, really know how work is done, be somebody that knows how to drive change, be a good investor and a good risk manager and have the courage to do that. And then the last thing I talk about is just culture, is just developing people and the importance of culture. And frequently culture is viewed as being too soft. I always laugh when I got a business degree, business school, MBA, the course I hated the most was organizational behavior. I would cut the class whenever I could. I thought it was too soft. I hated every second of it. My punishment for that is now it's all I do. It's just, so that is the punishment when you liked finance and hated organizational behavior. So people count, relationships count, caring about people count. Now in our case, we invest $1 billion a year in employee education and training. And we spend a ton of time. I probably spend 30 or 40% of my time just on evaluations and people and things like that. So people count. But the social norms, culture, also counts. And we talk about GE's culture. We use a phrase called GE Works. And that's the ads that we were talking about earlier are really the manifestation of that. And so we tell people when we go to recruit on college campuses, we say, here are the things about the GE culture. We're mission-based. We believe in the products that we sell. We think that we are creating great futures for our customers. And we believe, whether it's in healthcare or aviation or the other businesses we believe that mission counts. We believe in continuous improvement, what we call a search for a better way. We don't think we're ever the best at anything. We think you can always learn more. If you're 65 years old and you still want to learn, you are of value to us. If you're 25 years old and you think you know it all, you're of no value to us. So we believe in this search for a better way. We believe in solutions for our customers and society. So we're doing things in clean energy, we're doing things in affordable health care that we think offer the breadth of the company to drive solutions. And we talk about the company as being a we company, not a me company. We kind of say nobody's name is above the door. We all are subjugated to the value of the brand. We all are GE people. We are a we company. Now, 50% of the people that join us leave in the first 5 years. If you stay 5 years, you tend to stay forever. We like it that way. You know, we're not for everybody. You know, we like diversity, but at the same time, we want people to have a sense for who we are, and we want people to know that from the day they come in the door to the day they leave, that they work for a higher purpose. So, leadership, you know, point of view, accountability and metrics, knowing how work gets done, change orientation, investors and risk, and you are the purveyor of people and culture. And if you do those 6 things, you're going to run a pretty good organization in very tough, unmanageable times. So, the world, healthcare, leadership. I didn't just, I came to GE Healthcare in 1996. And I replaced a guy named John Tranny, who was an industrial, hard-nosed industrial guy. And we're having an overlap meeting, and he's going through and explaining the business to me. And he said, you know, the one thing, Jeff, is you know, the customers are a pain in the ass. You know, I said, it's good business, but the doctors are so tough, and they're always hassling you and stuff like that. And, you know, you're going to like everything about the business, but the customers are really tough. I love you guys. I love the customers in healthcare. You're smart. You're concerned. I think what healthcare gave me in terms of being able to run a big company like GE was a respect for relationships, a respect for technology. And I think if you're around healthcare, you understand that it's not always about the P&L, that you have to understand the context is bigger. And I think if you're in the business that you guys are in, you just get an appreciation for the scope and the fact that business has to understand its fit in the world. And particularly these days, that's not a bad thing to forget about. So I actually have a lot of time for our healthcare business. I actually, when I meet with our healthcare guys, I actually think the next 5 years are not going to be bad at all. You know, both globally and inside the business. And you know, for you guys, I think it's volume is going to grow. Costs are going to be tougher. Innovation is still profound. Merge with pathology. Own decision support. And that's where I think the future is going to go. So those are my comments tonight. I'm happy to answer a few questions. And again, I very much appreciate the work you're doing and what you've engaged in here. So thanks very much.